There's so many jobs that you can do online these days. And then seeing those that really have still a corporate lifestyle sort of, and I would ask them like, do you wear a suit? Like when you go back into your room?
Yeah, just from the waist up.
Yeah.
Are you ready? All right. Hi there, I'm Nora Dunn, and I'm otherwise known as the Professional Hobo, and welcome to my series where I speak with ordinary people who have extraordinary travel lifestyles and remote careers. I'm really excited about my guest today. I'm always excited about my guest today, but I'm really excited about my guest today because I think she's going to be instrumental in helping all of us, whether you have a remote career or you're an entrepreneur or anything in between. If you're looking at taking your job on the road, she's going to have some key advice for us. But before I introduce her, I encourage you to have a look in the description. There is a free link. Well, the link is always free. There's a link to a free checklist of 10 crucial things that you need to do before you travel long-term. This is going to give you a foundation of the sort of things that you need to be thinking about if you're planning to travel long-term, whether as a digital nomad or maintaining your home base or anything in between. Now, my guest today is Kathleen Di Paolo. She's the CEO and founder of Wanderers Wealth. Her goal is to empower digital nomads, entrepreneurs, and all other wanderers of the world with global financial freedom. She's an expert in international tax issues, international corporate structuring, and global residency matters. This is really, I'm a former financial planner, so this is really exciting for me to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me, Kathleen.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that introduction. Super excited to be here.
Oh, with great pleasure. Now, I promise not to bore anybody with too many numbers and stuff, but I think that this is what you currently offer is really topical. It's really relevant. There are now millions of people who have remote careers, a portion of whom are going to want to take their jobs on the road. And there are tax consequences to that, whether you want to travel full time, whether you want to start a business, or whether you're working for an employer who may or may not have a problem with you doing it from abroad. So what you offer is really key and it's very topical. But I'm curious, how did you go from working in diplomacy and law to being a digital nomad and international tax expert?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was very much involved in the academic world, and I've always been fascinated with different countries, understanding the different systems, the political systems, as well as fiscal policies. So that's how I got thrown into international relations and diplomacy. And then I wanted to help people out more directly. And that's when I decided and became obsessed with becoming a lawyer. And because I'd always been obsessed with finding out how these financial systems work, why countries are able to collect revenue, why some have taxes and others have not, because not every country has a tax system really, I dove into the tax system and started figuring out, how these different countries work. And then I decided to quit my corporate job and travel the world. That was all that I was going to do. I was obsessed with discovering cultures, moving around. And as soon as I decided to do that, I met so many digital nomads and entrepreneurs who were running their businesses from their laptops and had no idea what to do with their taxes. And once they knew about my background, everyone wanted my help. And at one point, I decided that I should start charging for my services and helping them out. And that's really how Wanderers Wealth was formed.
Wow. So a very organic process born out of not only your lifestyle choices, but your personal passions and expertise and knowledge. Now, was there a big learning curve for you to learn what you needed to learn in order to serve your markets in terms of international tax law?
Yeah, most certainly. I would say the background that I had coming from uni to what I was working and doing at the law firm on a day-by-day basis is completely different than what I do today. And it had a lot to do with my obsession of kind of figuring out all of these tax laws and also the various different tax residencies. Someone just recently called me the tax residency expert, and I was like, oh yeah, true. Like not every other tax lawyer really knows a lot about other tax residencies. So it really came down to me just wanting to know, like, how can people combine this lifestyle of moving around or just moving abroad in general with lowering their taxes. And you would be surprised how many tax incentive programs, how many tax schemes there are available around the world where countries do offer people to basically live tax-free for a year or so in exchange for them welcoming them into their country and being contributing to their economy. So I became obsessed with that and still am on a daily basis.
So are there any key opportunities along this line that you would like to highlight?
There's so many, but right now I would say Portugal is a very popular one. So many nomads moving to Portugal. It seems to be a little bit of the digital nomad hub, the remote workers hub, which comes together with a 10-year tax exemption scheme where you can almost live tax-free for 10 years if you structure things in the correct way. And then that one has been around for a while in Portugal, but then we have other places, the much newer trend right now, the digital nomad visas. So we have digital nomad visa in Croatia, for example, that just recently came out, and they're offering a year-long tax-free stay in Croatia. So there's so many various different digital nomad visas, plus older tax incentives that are already out there and that have existed for various numerous years and that are now being, more looked at now that remote workers can start traveling again.
Now, by tax-free, so if I get one of these special visas and I go to these places, Portugal or Croatia as an example, I have a special visa that permits me to work there, not a job on the ground, mind you, but to work online for my foreign employer or for myself and my own clients. So I don't have to pay tax in that country, but am I still obligated to pay tax in my home country? Or is that also a moving target?
That really depends where you're from. And that is a very great question, actually, because a lot of people miss that step. And it depends. If you're American, then yes, you will be forever paying taxes within the States because they do have a citizenship-based tax system, as opposed to if you're from Canada, you might not necessarily have to be paying any more taxes to Canada if you basically leave in the right way, if you do everything correctly and fill out all of the forms and go through this formal process. Then you might be in a very great position where you don't have any tax obligation with your old home country, and neither do you have one with the new country that is welcoming you and treating you, in such a great way where you can live tax-free. And then, you don't owe really taxes to anyone. Now, it really depends as well whether you're self-employed or you are employed by someone and you are a remote worker. Usually in that case, if you are employed, your employer would know your tax obligations, so they would already withhold a certain amount to cover your tax basis, as opposed to if you're self-employed, you're really kind of free to structure your things, set up a business or register as a freelancer, a self-employed person, and therefore draw out those tax incentives to a maximum.
Are there any disadvantages to not paying tax in any country?
Disadvantages? That's a good question. Sometimes it depends what your movements are, what your future trajectory is of your career, depending which institutions you're dealing with as well, and who your clients are if you do have your own business. I have seen people who have bigger clients and they kind of want to know where their business is set up, where they're paying taxes. They need to show a tax certificate or their tax residency certificate in order to be able to bring on those clients or to be paid by them. And in that case, you would want to make sure that you have some sort of certificate. Now, we don't have much case law yet in terms of, what's going to happen with all of those various digital nomad visas or remote workers visas that give you that tax-free year and how it's going to really go down and whatnot. I think for the Croatian one, they've just had 33 applicants. So, it's just in the beginning stages. We're yet to wait what's really going to happen to those people, what they can produce, what sort of official documentation they can produce to their old home tax country, to potentially a new place that they're going to move to. The question mostly comes up when you're dealing with formal institutions, whether it's clients, whether it's financial institutions, a bank, when you try to open up new bank accounts and you need to produce tax certificates or tax residency, tax ID numbers. Or even I've seen, you know, I deal with expat families as well who move around and have their kids in international schools. Those schools sometimes want to know the financial situation of the parents too. And in that case, they would have to produce some sort of tax certificate, tax residency documentation. So that's when it usually comes up, and when it would be important to have something in place.
You know, I ask because when I started traveling full time, digital nomad as a term or a concept didn't even exist. So, I mean, there were no special visas for people like me. But I maintained my tax residency in Canada. And that was because first of all, my understanding was, and you may have a better picture of this, but my understanding was that in order to become a non-resident of Canada for tax purposes, I had to cut all ties and I had to stay away for a certain amount of time. And it seemed really extreme. And I wanted to allow myself the opportunity to return to Canada without drama and to be able to plug into the healthcare system and whatnot. So I actually continued to pay tax on my worldwide income by filing a Canadian tax return every year. And so ultimately then it was no drama when I ended up returning to Canada. But, you know, had I had somebody like you at the helm consulting with me, you may have given me some different advice along the way. So how is it that you work with your clients? What is the process when someone comes to you?
It really depends where my clients are at. I've got clients who are just starting out with their nomad journey. I've got clients who have been doing this for 5 years, like you were saying, for a longer period of time, and they have still been paying taxes in their old home country. And now they're kind of coming to that place where they're like, I feel like, you know, I'm giving so much away. I'm really never going to return or live there full time. So how else can I lower my taxes? And I've also got larger businesses who are trying to setting up new structures in other tax-friendly countries. And yeah, just overall, I help them out lowering their taxes. That's the overall goal, obviously. And a lot of times it goes in a holistic approach in terms of I really want to make their tax strategy around their lifestyle. So wherever they are projecting into the future, whether it's their business growth or whether it's them wanting to move to Central America or to Asia, that's really how we approach it and see, okay, because really those tax incentives and schemes, they're available all around the world. So then we look at how is it going to fit together with your preferred lifestyle? You know, do you prefer Dubai over, as I said, Portugal? Those are two very different places. Not everyone who likes Dubai is going to like Portugal necessarily, and the other way around. And that's for my one-on-one consulting clients. It's very sort of personable, and we design a strategy that fits them. I usually design up to 3 different strategies for them, how we can lower their taxes significantly. And then I also do have digital products now. I have my online course, and I take people step by step through that exact process how I set up my clients one-on-one through the online course, and they can sort of put the pieces together themselves, and they get access, you know, to a whole variety of ebooks in which we've described all of the various different tax incentives that exist around the world. So it's almost like a collection for them to go back to. Whenever they move around, they can be like, oh, you know, there's this available in this country that I didn't even know, and that other available program that I didn't even know. So yeah, that's how we help our people to lower their taxes, basically to go to those countries that do have those tax incentive programs and schemes available.
And your courses and your consulting can be tailored to citizens of any country?
Pretty much, yeah. Well, I know that most of our clients, they come from English-speaking countries. So a lot of the times they're from Australia, Canada, US, UK, and all of Europe. We also do have South Africans. So I say usually if they are from any high-taxing Western countries, is what I call them, then yes, they will find, all the information and all the solutions, all of it inside of the course, and, we can help them as well. The only time that I've held back a few times is when people are from the Middle East, like from Iran and Pakistan. I've had to say, I'm probably not the best person to talk to, just because I'm not really aware on those systems and how it really operates. Now, I also do rely on a large network of accountants and lawyers all across the world. So if I do have someone who is wanting to move to Peru, then I have my Peruvian lawyer there who helps out setting up an entity and, filling out the tax returns. Or if someone wants to move to Estonia, then we have our Estonian lawyers who are sitting there and who are very much across the board about how it all works. And I usually instruct them on what we're doing on an international level, and they execute it on the national level.
That was my next question. I'm thinking, well, you're great at the design, but what about the implementation? But you've got that sorted as well. So yeah, that makes you a one-stop shop in that regard. So that's very good.
Yeah, that's the goal. One-stop shop, because what I hear so much from my clients is that they have spent already so much time on Google trying to figure it out and trying to put the pieces together here and there, and then there's conflicting information out there that they don't even know how to execute or who to talk to. So yeah, we're definitely a one-stop shop for people.
Let's imagine that I am a newly minted remote worker. Because of the pandemic, my job has been made remote, and on the other side of the pandemic, my job will continue to be remote, and I'm interested in working abroad and doing some long-term travel. What's the first thing that I should be thinking about from a tax and or residency perspective? What are some key things that I need to consider?
Well, the question that has come up a lot lately is, should I tell my employer or not that I'm actually going abroad? And I would say yes, be as open as possible with your employer, not just because you want to nurture that relationship, but also because it could have potential tax implications for your employer, and you want to make sure that they're covered on their end as well. With remote workers being able to work from anywhere, the major issue that has come up lately is that remote workers could actually potentially establish a permanent establishment in another country where the business isn't located, and therefore almost trigger a tax obligation in another country. It depends on how big the business is that you're working for, or how big your employer is, and all those sorts of things. But those are things that your employer will have to cover on their end. And, if they think there's no risk in you potentially creating such a permanent establishment, it could trigger a tax obligation in another country that they're not even established in, then you're basically all good to go. Now, if you do have more of a managerial role and you do have a lot of decision power within the company, then you want to be more careful around that topic and how much you're moving around, and whether it's a country with which your business, wherever, or your employer, wherever that business is set up, does have double taxing agreement in place or not, because there's a lot of mitigation there as well if there are double taxing agreements in place.
And is it possible that an employer, I'm assuming it's the larger companies that would be facing the more complicated situations, but what if it's a small company and the boss is like, well, I don't know. If I were trying to approach my employer doesn't know, but they don't seem particularly motivated to find out for me whether or not there's going to be a problem. Is there somewhere I can direct them to so they can get the right answers and know, and everyone can be above board?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, that's why I said at the beginning, we also deal with businesses and, with a bit larger corporate structures. Yeah, because that is a question that is coming up a lot right now in terms of, can we let our workers work remotely? Is that going to be okay? Is there going to be any implications for that? For smaller businesses, it really depends on, do they have any budget, for compliance? Are they going to be, if this is a business that is going to operate remotely anyway, I think it would be a great idea to take that budget to get a second advice from someone who knows all about the rules and what the risks might be, how you can mitigate those risks, and if you're better off hiring someone from a specific country, or if they're better, residing within a special country that has a double taxing agreement in place with wherever the business is incorporated.
Now, if we flip this over to the digital nomad side, so let's say I'm self-employed, I'm a digital, and I'm interested in being a digital nomad and working from around the world, or maybe I already am a digital nomad. What are some of the key things that I should be considering on that side?
If you're self-employed and you are a digital nomad, the key thing is really your tax residency and being aware of your tax obligations. And as you said before, whether or not you still have that tax obligation with your old home country. So many digital nomads, they simply pack their bags, and take off, super excited about their nomadic journey, not realizing that they still have a tax obligation with their old home country. And that's such a crucial and important step to not miss, especially when it comes to, as you said, cutting all the ties and formally declaring that you're no longer going to be a tax resident and that you're moving abroad. So that is really the key aspect with digital nomads. Before trying to figure out, where do I set up a business or which country has 0% tax, it's really dealing with your old home country and figuring out, okay, how can I make it a clean slate? I've, fulfilled all my obligations. And once that is all done, then you can go and hunt for those, 0% tax rates around the world.
Now, let's say I decide to wipe the slate clean and look for tax residency in another country that is more tax favorable. But X number of years later, I decide to return to my home country. Can I do that? And if so, what's involved?
Becoming a tax resident again of your home country isn't going to be that hard. They're going to welcome you back in if you want to contribute again to the system. That's usually no problem at all. Depending on where you need to be careful around the number of days that you decide to go and visit back home, because by you potentially going back home and visiting, you could fall back within tax residency if you overstay for a long period of time. And it really depends where you're from. Usually people say to keep it around 3 months, not longer than 3 months, because if you keep returning back for longer than 3 months, then that just goes to show to the government that really you're still considering this your home because you're regularly coming back. It's sort of almost your base. So you want to be careful with that as well, on how regular do you go back. Is it just 2 weeks? Then you don't have much to worry. But if it's like 3 months, 4 months every year, then definitely you want to be careful with not falling back within tax residency, within even realizing it, without realizing.
How long have you been a digital nomad?
I've been a digital nomad for almost 3 years now.
And how has your own travels and lifestyle evolved over those 3 years?
Great question. Well, I became a digital nomad before the pandemic. So before that, I was moving around a lot. And as I said, my first focus when I quit my corporate job was really to start traveling and see the world. So I was moving around a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean, we would never stay longer than 3 nights in one place and then just move on.
That's a lot. Okay.
Yeah, that is a lot. And then the pandemic hit and we actually got stranded in Australia during the pandemic. But even so, we rented a van and did all of Australia, did all of the East Coast, did all of the West Coast. And then once we were done, we were like, okay, cool. And took off to Mexico. So yeah. And then, now since then, this was at the beginning of this year, we've kind of more enjoyed the slow traveling, nomadic, slow travel. And we are in Bali right now. And I think going forward, definitely we'll do more so of the slow travel and just yeah, have somewhat of an Airbnb or more of a home base in whichever country we are, but still travel from there. And my partner is a travel blogger, travel photographer. So that keeps us on our feet as well. Whenever we go somewhere, we really want to explore all the places and take all the pictures. So we will never slow down, like really slow down, but we'll certainly will stay longer than 3 nights in one place.
So what's your sweet spot for how long you would stay in a destination?
I would say a month is a good amount, and then move on. Yeah, definitely.
And that would be like a month in a country or a month in one place in the country and then moving around within there?
Yeah, exactly. In one place in a country and then moving around within there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get quite itchy feet. Yeah, it's just something, I don't know what is going on in my head, but I just feel like we always need to constantly be moving. And whenever we're too long in one place, which now we've been in for 2 months here, and I'm like, okay, like cool, we've seen it. I'm sort of ready.
Do you feel that the travel lifestyle affects or comes in conflict with your productivity and your working hours at all? Like, how has it been for you to strike that balance between working and traveling?
That's a good question. And to be honest, I'm still trying to figure it out. And as I grow and my business grows, there's new challenges to adapt to. Sorry. And I would say I had a period where I was super busy in terms of one-on-one consulting, and that gets really tough with moving around a lot, because I would never know in what time zone I was going to be in a month from now. And I was usually booked out 1 or 2 months in advance. So it made it really challenging to tell people. I would just have, people, I'm not hiding that I'm a nomad, so people are aware. And every now and then, yes, I will have to send out an email saying, hey, look, it's gonna be midnight for me, I can't make it, we'll have to shift things around. And that's also the reason why I started creating these digital products and the course, because I was like, there's no way people should be waiting a month or 2 months to get their answers to, till I'm free or know that I'm gonna have Wi-Fi somewhere. And that's why that digital product creation was so important for me and my business, and is literally making it so much easier for me to be a nomad and to still serve and help people, as opposed to the one-on-one consulting that has always been a bit challenging, and knowing what days I would open up to take consultations, what days I would close it down, because we will be traveling and so much on the road.
It sounds like you're really getting into a groove, and of course your itchy feet are definitely dictating the way for you for now. Is this, and we can, I invite you to look into your magic crystal ball without necessarily making a commitment to me and to our audience, but do you feel like this is a forever thing for you, or do you have, is there kind of a long-term view that you have for how things are going to evolve over time?
For now, yes, I would say this is a forever thing for me. I also come already from a very intercultural background. So moving around for me is nothing new. It was not like, I discovered. I feel like it's already within my blood, and I'm going to continue to be on this journey. And I definitely think we do have countries that we specifically like where we are right now in Bali. It's like our home base together with, I would say, Australia and Mexico. So those are like our preferred countries. And whenever we feel like we need a little breather, we tend to go back to those countries that seem really familiar and that we like. But then in between, now we're happy to go, wherever and explore every corner of the world. So yeah, hopefully it's gonna be forever.
I think that's an excellent balance that you've struck. Having the few places that have that, offer that familiarity that you can return to. That's probably a mistake that I made along the way, because I traveled full time for 12 years, but I didn't often, if really at all, return to places. I did set up bases from places that lasted up to 2 years, and I would use that as a base for travel. But I rarely returned to somewhere familiar to just chill. And there is something that's really comforting in having that contextual baseline of understanding the place and knowing what you're going to get when you get there. Because as you probably know, it's a lot of work. It's enjoyable, but it's a lot of work to arrive to a place and then to learn just how to simply exist in that place. And that can take a lot of energy if that's all you're doing all the time.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And what we've also really come to enjoy lately is co-working spaces and co-living spaces as well, just because you're automatically like thrown in with like-minded people. And especially I would say us traveling as a couple. Well, my partner is really sociable, but so he doesn't have any problem making friends anywhere. But it's just that aspect of, I don't know, it's easier sometimes when you travel solo to make new friends and new connections as when you're a couple, I would say. So that always helps out as well, you know, when we go somewhere and there's other couples, or we usually tend to travel with someone, like there's always a third wheel with us, which is funny, but and so, you know, just make that connection with other people who are happy to travel, who are happy to, you know, work as well, and know how that lifestyle works, and won't be mad if you say, yeah, you know what, this afternoon I will have to work, you know, and just sit down and get it done. Yeah, that's been really great for us as well, diving into that sort of nomadic culture, or whatever you want to call it.
I hear you wholeheartedly. And that's actually something that I'm going to be in my future travels. I'm going to be exploring that more in terms of the co-working and co-living and whatnot, because and also attending conferences and not because I often thought that, you know, a lot of co-working or co-living or any of these sort of, you know, surrounding myself with other digital nomads was somehow at the expense of culturally immersing myself. And I've come to understand that that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. I spent so many years, you know, house sitting on some random mountaintop, or milking goats, or painting murals, or apprenticing with a shaman, or doing all these random things that were like super duper culturally immersive. But in the end, you know, 15 years later, I find that I'm only now just starting to get to know my colleagues in the industry, and to be able to compare business ideas and grow in that way. I mean, I really had to try to figure out everything on my own, and I realized in retrospect that perhaps I didn't need to. Like, there were other people doing this. Yeah. I just didn't know them. So I'm looking forward to being able to dive more into these communities, but also being very cognizant of not doing that at the expense of respecting and learning about and being a part of the local communities and economies as well. Because I think there is a balance between those elements that can be struck.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been so interesting in specifically in Mexico as well, where we found there was such a good mix of digital nomads, but also remote workers. Like, we were together with some people in those co-living spaces that had employees of Bank of America, you know, there, and you just go and do your own thing. And it's so funny seeing what everyone's doing, because there's so many jobs that you can do online these days. And then seeing those that really have still a corporate lifestyle sort of. And I would ask them, like, do you wear a suit, like, when you go back into your room?
Yeah, just from the waist up.
Yeah. No, it's really this cool new opportunity to meet, you know, people who are still living their corporate lifestyle, and people who are in that more nomadic journey and have their own businesses. It's a great mix.
Do you have any advice for someone from a lifestyle perspective who's either a remote worker or a digital nomad who wants to take their life on the road?
I would say to just go for it, to be honest. As cliche as it sounds, it's just to make that decision to go for it. And then, you know, whatever you decide to do, however you decide to have an income, whether it's freelancing or doing random jobs on Fiverr or Upwork, it won't always be the same, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you know, once you make that decision to go on that journey, you will probably find other people who you can collaborate with, that will spark new ideas, and you won't even end up having the same job that you left with, so to speak. So if that's your preferred lifestyle in terms of wanting to travel, wanting to work, then definitely just go for it, and you will figure out what you're meant to be supposed to be doing along the way.
That's so true, because I think that, I mean, I generally advise people to have the foundations of their online career or whatever it is that they're going to do for money, have at least the foundations established before you go. Because if you're trying to figure that out concurrent to trying to figure out how to live on the road, that's what I did. Don't do it. It's too much work. It's too hard. And one is always going to be sacrificed for the other. You know, I was either working at the expense of traveling and enjoying my destination, or I was traveling at the expense of making a living. But that the idea of keeping your eyes and ears open to opportunities, be they new ways of earning money and new jobs and new forms of income, or be it new ways of traveling and new places to go to that you hadn't previously considered. I think all of that is very important. And in some ways, that's kind of what travel is about, is being open to opportunities. So it's important to plan, but not to plan so minutely that it doesn't allow you to experience the magic of whatever you discover when you're on the road.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, you know, have a little bit of a budget as well. Like, don't leave without any savings or whatnot, because what's the point of going somewhere if you're going to be on a budget the whole time and can't even experience certain, you know, touristic things that you want to be doing while you're visiting a new country. So
all right, that's a great suggestion. And I'm going to ask you to quantify it now. How much money should someone have before they get into this lifestyle? Do you have a recommendation along those lines?
I would say probably if you are on a lower budget, if you're happy to live on a lower budget, I would say to at least have $15,000, $20,000 for a whole year, and depending as well on what countries you want to visit. But if you want to go, you know, to the cheaper countries in Asia, you can definitely do that for a little while, as opposed to other more expensive countries.
So having that much money in the bank then allows you enough of a buffer that if your income for whatever reason fluctuates or disappears or whatnot, you do have the ability to continue to find something else to do to be able to keep the lifestyle financially sustainable. Is that about what you're?
Yeah, I would say that's about right.
I always say it's important to have at least, I mean, I always say more, but at least have an emergency fund. And that emergency fund is not touched at any expense. And it is enough money to get you home in a pinch from anywhere in the world. Because for whatever reason, if you get that phone call or something happens and you have to drop everything and go back to your home country, maybe it's to attend to a family emergency or whatever it is, right? Or maybe you're just out of money and you got to go home. Have at least enough money to do that. And that is the bare minimum for an emergency fund. And then your suggestion to have a year's worth of expenses as your buffer in a savings, I think that is very good. That's good advice. It may seem like a lot of money if you're saving and starting from scratch, but I traveled for a while with a partner who was not in a good position financially, and it was very stressful, and it affected his ability to enjoy the destination. It affected our relationship. It affected everything. So money stress is hard enough at home. It's even harder on the road, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because at least at home, you know where you can save money and which store you can go to budget more. Whereas on the road, you don't know any of those things unless you spend a lot of time on Google search.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for us today?
You know, there's so many things that we could be talking about in terms of how to make this work. You've been a nomad for so many years. I've now done it for 3 years and will continue doing it hopefully forever. I also think with all the things that we can prepare and be ready for is also just to embrace the journey, and that we're kind of part of this new wave. I think that's the one most exciting thing, is the opportunities that are available to us nowadays is just incredible. And more so now after the pandemic, of being able to really work from anywhere and make an income from anywhere. And it's not just having your own business, you know, there's so many different things. People teach online, people have e-commerces and consulting, coaching, whatnot. So yeah, just to sort of come at it with a little bit of excitement that we've got this opportunity now available. And we're also right now with, you know, all those different tax incentive programs and schemes that are available, we're still trying to figure it out, right, of how to make this digitalized age work for us. And governments are still like 10 years behind us. So, you know, let's make the most of it while we still can. Let's get excited that they're still trying to figure out and write all these new rules and laws, because maybe in 10, 20 years, they will have caught up and it will all be data, a massive sharing of data between different governments officials. So I think we're in this very great time and age that we can be part of and be excited about.
Absolutely, and to be able to take advantage of not anything untoward. There's no evasion going on, but I just want to make it clear. But certainly, as you say, to be able to take advantage of the systems that are in place for us right now, and perhaps, like you say, once the governments catch up to everything, everything's going to become a little more restrictive. It may be a little more difficult from a tax perspective for us to move around in the same way that we have now. Just like when I was traveling as a digital nomad, you know, 10 years ago or so, there were no visas. There was nothing of this existed, right? So digital nomads at that time fell into this giant gray area from a visa perspective. So we weren't working and taking jobs away from locals in the countries we were in. It didn't make sense to get work visas. We weren't conducting business in the countries. It didn't make sense to get business visas. So what did we do? We traveled on tourist visas. And that was one of those loopholes, because there wasn't a system for us. Well, now those systems are starting to be developed, and for better and worse, because in some ways that provides a lot of really interesting opportunities and incentives for digital nomads. And there's amazing things happening. There's e-residencies and digital nomad nations and special, you know, global citizen initiatives. So who knows what's coming? And I appreciate your advice to just get out there and get it done, and be open to whatever the journey may provide, because the journey is the destination. Well, thank you so much, Kathleen, for joining me today. I trust that this information is going to be very useful for all our viewers for a long time to come. Where can people find you?
I hang out mostly on Instagram at wanderers.wealth, and otherwise on our website, wandererswealth.com. And yeah, just text me, message me, I'll be hanging out somewhere.
Awesome. Cool. Yes, you'll be hanging out in some delightful location, no less. And I will definitely put links as well to all of that in the description as well. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kathleen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Nora Dunn, and I'm otherwise known as the Professional Hobo, and I will catch you next time.